And to everybody here, no matter who tells you what, South Africa's future can only be bright if it is a shared future. If we forget about black, white, Indian, and colored, and we start concentrating that we are South Africans and we need to build this country. Zuma's unapologetic of what he's going to do when he comes in. Expropriation without compensation is number one on his list. And that will destroy property rights. And any country with no property rights is not a country. We have to keep this GNU together. We have to keep this GNU strong. But I do know as a businessman, deep down in my heart, deep down, if I'm honest with you, I would also want to take the land for free. But I understand that the moment you do that, you have no country left. A country is built on property rights. It's built on property rights, not on your wishes.
Guys, Gayton McKenzie has actually been warning. He's actually been at the forefront of this warning about Jacob Zuma's influence in South Africa and how the MK party is actually ready to take over the GNU. All right. And I'm really wondering if probably this is now time to start listening to what he's actually saying. Because one of the things he actually argues is that one of the first thing on Jacob Zuma's list is expropriation of land without compensation. So even though President Ramaphosa's regime has actually passed the act, the Expropriation Act, it actually appears that according to Gayton McKenzie, if I'm listening to him correctly, Jacob Zuma would enforce that act in its fullest version, so to speak. And as a businessman who he is, and being on the centrist, although he calls himself on the conservative right of the whole political spectrum, he's going to really be affected because he argues that if you expropriate land without compensation, you are infringing on property rights. And without property rights, there's no country. Let's quickly listen to Gayton McKenzie break these things really down at this Peace News conference. Really powerful speech. And I'll be back for a few thoughts.
There's only one thing that can stop Jacob Zuma. Never forget what I'm going to tell you today. If you don't stop Jacob Zuma, he is going to lead this country in 2029. He's strong on his way, whether you like that or not. And Zuma's unapologetic of what he's going to do when he comes in. Expropriation without compensation is number one on his list. And that will destroy property rights. And any country with no property rights is not a country. What will stop Jacob Zuma? The GNU. The GNU will stop Jacob Zuma, and that's the only thing that the DA and the PA needs to understand, and the ANC. Only the GNU can stop Jacob Zuma, because Jacob Zuma has campaigned that the GNU is shit. He tells everyone the GNU is shit. Now, if the GNU is really shit, they're going to say Zuma is telling the truth. But if the GNU can deliver, they're going to say Jacob Zuma is talking shit. The GNU is not shit. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our reality. We have to keep this GNU together. We have to keep this GNU strong. No matter our egos. And we are not innocent. The PA is not innocent. We are also a guilty party in some of the nonsense that are happening. But we have to put South Africa first. By not doing that, I believe in expropriation with compensation. Because white people, you can't sit with all the land. But I believe you have to pay them market value for the land. But I do know as a businessman, deep down in my heart, deep down, if I'm honest with you, I would also want to take the land for free. But I understand that the moment you do that, you have no country left. A country is built on property rights. It's built on property rights, not on your wishes. So in conclusion, I want to say to everyone here today, we got to be honest about our circumstances in this country. The GNU needs to survive. The GNU is the only thing that can stop the Zuma tsunami. And I want to impress on you and tell your leadership and whatever party you had, we have to fix issues. And I must say it here, I've come to have a whole lot of more respect for Cyril Ramaphosa than what I initially had. Simply because what I've seen, the patience, how he's trying to keep this thing together is not easy. It is a difficult thing. You have Gayton McKenzie here. You have John Steenhuisen there. It's like we're like a group of a weapon of mass destruction that he keeps on saying, no, don't detonate, don't do this, don't do that. So I'm saying to you, South Africa is going to survive. We are smarter than our problems. We are a great nation, and anybody that tells you we are not going to survive is not a true South African. We always rise to the occasion. And to everybody here, no matter who tells you what, South Africa's future can only be bright if it is a shared future. If we forget about black, white, Indian, and colored, and we start concentrating that we are South Africans and we need to build this country. And I see my favorite person in the audience. I love you so much. I call them the gold diggers. So, like the most decorated Olympian in the history of South Africa is here today. Can we give a hand of applause? Tatiana. I know she hates me for that now. So all I want to say to you that it's not all doom and gloom. Not all doom and gloom. Let me tell you, South Africa's got too many great South Africans for us to fail. We will never, ever, ever, ever fail. And some of us are there and we test the boundaries. We want to make sure that people can see. I, for one, put out an advert this week. You saw it in the newspapers where I said that black men should not apply for this job, only white and Indian. Jesus, het 'n kak gekry. But then all my black friends like, what the hell, that's racist. I said, but you've been having adverts like that. How do you think we feel? I'm a colored male. Now you know how we feel. So all I'm saying to you is that we gotta build this country. We have only one South Africa. I've traveled the world. There's no country for South Africa. These farmers, they want to go to America. One thing about farmers, they love Afrikaners. There's specific things they love, specific to them. Biltong, Radio Sonder Grense, Ouma Beskuit, rugby, daar's fokol van hy kak af. Thank you very much, nice speaking to you.
Yeah, guys, so I don't know. It's really something that probably South Africans need to start listening. And, the MK party is really, I've been slowly studying their machinery. It's a really well-oiled machinery, that is now being perfectly organized. The organization is really taking shape. And according to Gayton McKenzie, if you heard him correctly, he actually argues that the MK in power would probably likely be a blow to, so to speak, business minds or business people like him, because first things first would be this whole thing with expropriation. And I was listening to Penwell the Black Pen's critique of Rob Hessoff's speech and Helen Zille's speech, and also his own speech, that's Gayton McKenzie's speech at this big business conference. And he was arguing that there's a wrong statistics that actually says that, I think he argues that the argument was such that it is argued that 10% of white people own about 80% of the land in South Africa. This was, I don't know if this is the specific figure, but this is the line of his argument. Now, he was trying to really call his listeners to understand that that might not be correct, but what might be correct is the fact that a minority group in South Africa, probably the 10%, own 80% of the farmlands in South Africa, and that's a totally different thing from owning a land. All right, so if you remember my last video with Julius Nyerere, the Ujamaa socialist leader of Tanzania, first president of Tanzania, he complained that one of the biggest mistakes they made while he was in power was the fact that they nationalized the farms. All right, so nationalization of land, according to him, in Tanzania was normal. All right, so the land was a public entity. Whoever needed land would come to the government and all of that. But the moment they nationalized the farms, all right, or the farmland, then that was when Tanzania started getting a shock, economic shock and all of that. And I think this is what Gayton McKenzie speaks about whenever he speaks about this whole thing with expropriation and property rights. Because the moment you infringe on property rights, according to Gayton McKenzie, and in this case, farmlands, which are usually private owned, then, there's speaking to this shock that actually might, come up in the nation. And all of that, and for me, most of the time when I think about this thing with especially the farm right, I'm always worried a little bit about how to really start this bridging process of the equity, all right, or equality, so to speak, because I really don't know how some of these lands will, you guys probably will have to educate me in the comments, but I really don't know, because in Nigeria we really didn't have these kinds of problems where there were lots of people you know, complaining about a minority group owning a certain amount of land. So I think the time I saw that in Nigeria's history was during the 1804 there was a jihad by one man called Usman Dan Fodio, when he was trying to really cement the what was then called the Sokoto Caliphate. There were these small cities that the jihad was meant to bring them all together into a caliphate in Sokoto, northern Nigeria, before the arrival of the British colonial machinery at the time. And so what happened then was that there were lots of these peasants who then had to become, so to speak, they had to be arranged in this kind of rental situation where they had to pay rents, being peasants, so to speak. They had to pay rents to owners. And I think that was basically the major element of land, what might have been land expropriation at the time in Nigeria's history. Well, then we now had the 1960s independence. We had the 1967 Biafran War, the war between Biafra and Nigeria. Although at that time as well, we could argue that that might have been some sort of expropriation, but not expropriation, because most of the Igbos who had properties in other parts of the country had to abandon their properties, the land and private thing, because of war. This is now because of a war, all right, because they were being persecuted and they had to leave and come down to the eastern part of Nigeria to continue their existence. But that wasn't the kind of like a case of this particular case of really expropriation as we see in South Africa, where, you know, private ownership of land or private land would have then to be probably taken away and redistributed, so to speak. It's a really challenging one, really complex one. And so this is where the likes of Gayton Mackenzie is actually really pushing and actually arguing for expropriation with compensation, all right? Because at the time that land was bought, you know, up till present, there's been a lot of value being put on it, and, you know, to take it down without compensating all the pain of the value that has been put into that land seems a little bit weird. This is from his perspective as a business person. Another person, probably from the left, would actually say, well, this was land that was actually stolen from our forefathers already. So this was land that, you know, we actually already own. Why should we have to delay in taking back what belongs to us? And so these are the really complexities around this whole thing, and a leader that has real deep wisdom has to arise and how to solve this whole entity. So otherwise it's just going to keep on. From the things I really read about South Africa's politics, I think most of it really boils down to the land and the issue with farmland and who should own and have the lands and all of that. It's time to really start slowly engaging these discussions without being violent. But I don't know, what do you guys think? I don't want this video to be too long. What do you think about Gayton Mackenzie's speech here? Land expropriation, property rights in South Africa, Jacob Zuma, the ANC. Share your thoughts, guys, in the comments.